Hello, good afternoon. JC here from We Are the Arsenal. Welcome back to another Arsenal news show. I hope everyone is doing well today. Not too down and disheartened after yesterday's difficult result to take. Having watched the game myself, it was certainly tough, and myself, Keith, Neil and John will be reviewing that and analysing that game this evening on the channel. So do keep an eye out for that. And whilst we're on the subject, if you don't want to miss out on any future shows, including that one this evening, make sure you have the notification bell turned on, as I will continue to bring you more news all the way up until the end of the January transfer window. Drop a like as well if you are enjoying, or if you go on to enjoy today's video, and subscribe if you're new around here. It really helps me out. So without no further ado, let's jump straight into things. Plenty of news to bring you over the last sort of 24 to 48 hours, starting with the goalkeeper situation at Arsenal. So according to several sources, but first reported by a gentleman called Taylor Twellman, Arsenal have made an offer in the region of around £5 to £7 million for New England Revolution goalkeeper Matt Turner. Not someone that I've heard of. Yesterday was the first time I'd ever come across his name, if I'm being honest with you. This was later then reported and confirmed by the likes of Chris Wheatley, who also mentions that Leno could be on his way out of the club, which we'll get onto in just a moment. And again, Romano also mentioned that this deal is probably moving in the right direction. Personal terms not looking to be an issue. I think everyone kind of knew deep down that Bernd Leno could potentially be moving on, more likely in the summer as opposed to now, which we'll get into in just a moment. So a goalkeeper, or at least a backup goalkeeper, was always going to be on the shopping list for Arsenal at the very latest in the summer. We've got some very good youth goalkeepers at the club, but I wouldn't say they're at the level that is required to be backup to Ramsdale and feature in some of the cup competitions moving forwards. And whilst on the subject of Leno and goalkeepers, yes, as you can probably understand, he is now subject to some speculation. He's not happy at Arsenal being number 2. Very limited opportunities since Ramsdale displaced him earlier this season. Apparently, Newcastle have held talks with both Arsenal and his agents. Leno not particularly keen on the deal given where they find themselves in the Premier League, and he does feel as though he can play for a, top tier club, maybe not Champions League level, but certainly a club that could be in a European competition next year. He would prefer a move back home in Germany, but the deal from Newcastle is a loan with an obligation to buy in the summer. Leverkusen also interested in the player, but a deal this month in January is difficult given their financial situation. So they themselves would be looking at a deal in the summer as well. And finally, there are 2 unnamed clubs also interested in Leno from Spain. So plenty of interest, and I do expect him to move on, whether it be this window, more than likely the summer, because Arsenal don't have a recognised number 2 as things stand. Up next, the right-back situation at the club. Cedric and Chambers. So Arsenal are said to be looking at fresh options at right-back, and therefore both Cedric and Chambers are now available. Whether or not that means January or the summer, it could potentially mean that Arsenal are looking at options now ahead of time for the summer. This was reported by James Ollie as well. And I think Arsenal just want to provide a bit more depth at right back in terms of quality and provide a better level of competition to the player as well. Now, away from transfers for just a moment, prior to Arsenal, being knocked out of the Carabao Cup yesterday, there was news breaking from The Athletic that Liverpool were being a little bit dodgy prior to the first game being rearranged, shall we say. So the report suggests that Liverpool originally returned negative COVID tests, then ordered extra ones that weren't actually required. They then turned up positive, so the game versus Arsenal was cancelled. However, tests were faulty, but not made public at first. Now, the second set of tests that were ordered were from a company where Kenny Dalglish's daughter works. So as you can appreciate, there is a lot of, I wouldn't say uproar, but it's under the microscope at the moment. Whether or not the Premier League would look to investigate this is a whole different question altogether. Need to tread carefully. Games are being called off left, right and centre for COVID reasons, injury reasons. But from an Arsenal point of view, it just doesn't sit well. And obviously, a lot of clubs, when the game was first called off, were asking for this to be investigated. And now with this new information at hand, who knows what could happen. Up next, we've got a player that I've never heard of before. Likewise with the first story, a youngster from Brazil, a gentleman called Savio. So Arsenal and Red Bull are interested in the 17-year-old Brazilian winger. His club Atlético Mineiro, if I'm even pronouncing that correctly, had an official bid. Doesn't say where it's from Arsenal or Red Bull, of around £4 million, but it was rejected. Arsenal are said to be very interested in the player and now expected to really press on to try and sign him, or at least start negotiations. And this was brought to us by a gentleman called Bruno Anange. So reliable source or not, someone that I've not really come across before, but certainly one to keep an eye on. It would be a prospect. I very much doubt it's a player that comes into the Arsenal first team, but if it's something that Edu's done, unearthing another gem from Brazil like he did with Martinelli, I'm absolutely all for it. And very, very quickly, if you didn't already know, yesterday, Pablo Mauri officially joined Udinese on loan up until the end of the season. It is just a straight loan, no option or obligation to buy. So the best of luck to him. Now, we've got three big stories to get into. We've probably got some of the usual suspects, as you've already guessed. And before we go into those stories, if you haven't done so already, drop a like. It really, really helps me out. Subscribe if you're new around here. And as already mentioned at the start of the show, turn that notification bell on, because there will be plenty more shows, game reviews, transfer news, Arsenal news, all the way up until the end of the January transfer window and beyond. So as you probably guessed, someone that we speak about nearly every single time we do one of these Arsenal news shows, Arthur Melo. So Arsenal could be open to an 18-month loan with an option to buy, something that we reported in the previous Arsenal news show. It's a much more financially sound deal for Juventus. I'm assuming there'd be some sort of fee for the loan over the course of 18 months. Juventus still want to find a replacement before allowing him to go, and it does seem to be picking up now that Dennis Zakaria of Borussia Mönchengladbach, who could be available for around €5 million, looks to potentially be that replacement. Bruno Guimaraes, who Arsenal are also very interested in, off the table. The deal's too complicated as things stand. And this is all being reported by Marco Di Natale from Italy. So you'd imagine that it's a fairly decent source. However, another report coming in this afternoon, because the one just mentioned was yesterday. This afternoon, it's also being reported that Juventus want Arsenal to loan Arthur for 18 months, as the report just says, with an option to buy at the end of it for €50 million, which is decent. I think an option to buy is better than an obligation, because if he really does tear things up in the Premier League for Arsenal with the lack of depth and quality we have in midfield, it gives us an option to bring him in on a permanent basis. Isn't going to break the bank, and all round a really, really good deal. So as long as that fee for the 18-month loan deal isn't too bad, I'm all for this. And we're desperate. We're absolutely desperate for more reinforcements in midfield. A want away from Arsenal, potentially, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang has been subject of another loan proposal, another club from Saudi Arabia, Al Hilal, I think that's pronounced. But this one is with an option as opposed to an obligation to buy, which was the previous report from Al Nassr, another club over in Saudi Arabia. They would like to take him on loan for the entirety of this season, cover all of his wages. So financially, it makes a lot of sense to Arsenal. They'd be really, really, really happy with it. But on this occasion, they're only saying that it's an option to buy. So a very attractive deal. And this was brought to us by Sami Mokbel of the Daily Mail. However, earlier this morning, Chris Wheatley also confirmed that Arsenal are mulling over several different offers from Saudi Arabia. Is it just those two clubs already mentioned, or are there others that are potentially interested? And Sky Sports News this afternoon also reported that there are interest from several European clubs, which include PSG, AC Milan, Sevilla, Marseille, who would need to sign him this month, considering their transfer ban that's coming up, as well as Juventus. So is Aubameyang on his way out of the club this month? We'll have to wait and see. It's an interesting story because it only leaves Lacazette and Nketiah at the club until the end of the season, both of which are more than likely leaving in the summer. And if either of them were to get injured, it really leaves us short in that department. So, as you've probably seen in the thumbnail, there is a huge twist in our headline story of Vlahovic. Juventus, as I said to you the other day, were said to be interested. It's his preferred destination. And that big twist, according to Gazzetta, is that they have made a cash plus player bid for Vlahovic, and Fiorentina open to this suggestion. Now, that cash offer is somewhere in the region of around 70 million euros. And previous reports have said that Juventus just simply don't have that sort of money in January. It would make more sense to make a bid for the player come the summer. And others have even said that they can't afford him at all and would have to wait for his contract to run down in 2023. Now, the cash plus player deal does seem, well, really good for Fiorentina. And other reports have suggested that the actual fee isn't as high as 70 million because Kulusevski, which is the player that is involved in this deal, is probably valued at somewhere in the region of around 30 to 40 million euros. So Juventus would probably be paying somewhere in the region of around about, well, 30, 40 million euros themselves if they were in to include Kulusevski. Now, this afternoon, Fiorentina director actually confirmed in an interview that they want to sell Dusan Vlahovic this month, adding that some English clubs have made contact, but there is no agreement yet. We are open to selling the player. So no mention of Juventus, no mention of Italian clubs, just purely English clubs who are interested. Arsenal obviously had the most interest, but interesting to see English clubs. And there are other clubs in the Premier League who could really do with a striker this month to really push the campaign. So who knows? And that is going to about finish all of today's stories. If you do have any questions, do hit me up in the chat right now. I will try my best to answer them. And going over to the chat very quickly, we've got Charlie here. Thank you very much for coming along and showing your support. I hope you're very well, my friend. And you also ask a question here, or at least make a comment around Savio. Looks really good and promising. Hasn't scored or assisted yet. If we get him, don't expect the immediate impact Martinelli had. I can't comment on the player. I don't really know too much about him. It sounds like you're quite familiar. So thank you very much for letting me and any of the viewers know. Always really helpful to share this type of information, especially on players that we're, well, not too aware of. Hopefully, maybe not the impact that Martinelli had, but maybe another gem like Martinelli a few years down the line. That would be absolutely superb. And we've also got Judge over in the chat as well. Thank you very much for coming along and showing your support, my friends. Doesn't look like we've got any other comments or questions in the chat box at the moment. So that is going to wrap things up for today. If you are around at about 9 o'clock this evening UK time, as I said already, I will be joined by Keith from Mostly Arsenal, Neil from Cannon FC, and my friend John, as we unfortunately and aggressively potentially review the Arsenal-Liverpool semi-final in the Carabao Cup. So if you're available, do come along. But thank you very much for showing your support. I hope you have found today very useful. But for now, I'm JC, and I will catch you later on this evening. Goodbye.